The security camera footage is grainy. Timestamp burned into the corner. February 14th, 2019, 11:47 p.m. A young woman stands alone in a hotel corridor, her dark hair falling past her shoulders as she approaches the elevator. She presses the button. Waits. Then something changes. Her body language shifts in ways that forensic analysts would study for years to come. She steps inside the elevator, and what happens next would haunt investigators and capture the attention of millions worldwide. This is the last confirmed sighting of 23-year-old Priscilla Reyes, and the footage from that hallway would become one of the most analyzed pieces of evidence in modern true crime history. Before we dive into this deeply unsettling case, if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This channel is dedicated to telling these stories with the respect and detail they deserve, and your support helps us continue this important work. Today's case will challenge everything you think you know about disappearances, surveillance evidence, and the thin line between the explicable and the inexplicable. What happened to Priscilla Reyes in the minutes after that elevator door closed? The answer involves forensic mysteries, technological puzzles, and a family's desperate search for truth that continues to this day. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this case has baffled some of the best investigative minds in the country, and why the haunting image of that young woman standing in that corridor has become impossible to forget. Priscilla Elena Reyes was 23 years old, standing 5 feet 4 inches tall, with a slender build that weighed approximately 115 pounds. She had striking dark brown eyes that her mother described as always seeing the good in people, and long, straight black hair that reached midway down her back, which she usually wore parted down the middle. On her left wrist, she wore a silver bracelet her grandmother had given her on her quinceañera, a piece of jewelry she never removed. On her right ankle, a small tattoo of a hummingbird, which she'd gotten on her 21st birthday to represent freedom and resilience. Born and raised in San Antonio, Texas, Priscilla was the middle child in a tight-knit Mexican-American family. Her father, Roberto Reyes, worked as a mechanic, while her mother, Carmen, managed a local bakery. Priscilla had an older brother, Marco, who was 26 and worked in construction, and a younger sister, Sophia, who was 19 and studying nursing. The Reyes family lived in a modest home in the West Side neighborhood, where everyone knew everyone, and Sunday dinners were sacred traditions that brought the entire extended family together. Those who knew Priscilla described her as quietly intelligent, the kind of person who observed more than she spoke. She had graduated from Texas State University just 8 months before her disappearance with a degree in graphic design, and she'd been working as a junior designer at a small marketing agency in downtown San Antonio. Her supervisor, Janet Mitchell, would later tell investigators that Priscilla had exceptional talent, particularly with digital illustration, and had recently been given more responsibility on major client accounts. She was reliable, creative, and showed up every day with what Janet called a quiet determination to prove herself. But Priscilla wasn't all work and ambition. She had a playful side that came out around those she trusted. She loved vintage horror movies from the 70s and 80s, collecting original posters that covered the walls of her bedroom. Every Friday night, she would video chat with her best friend since high school, Andrea Torres, and they would watch a classic horror film together while eating pizza and commenting on the terrible special effects. Her favorite was The Exorcist, which she'd seen at least 20 times. She also had an unexpected passion for baking, something she'd learned from her mother, and she was known for bringing homemade conchas and pan dulce to the office, treats that disappeared within minutes. Priscilla's typical weekday routine was predictable and structured. She would wake at 6:30 in the morning, shower, and spend exactly 20 minutes on her makeup and hair. She was particular about her appearance, but never vain. She'd leave the house by 7:15, stopping at the same Starbucks on Commerce Street, where the baristas knew her order by heart. A grande vanilla latte with an extra shot of espresso and almond milk. She'd arrive at the office by 8, work through lunch at her desk while sketching in her iPad, and leave promptly at 5:30. Most evenings she'd go to the gym for an hour, then return home for dinner with her family. Her personal life was quieter than some might expect for someone her age. She'd been in a relationship with her boyfriend, David Martinez, for 2 years. David was 25, worked as an IT specialist at a local hospital, and according to everyone who knew them, treated Priscilla like gold. They'd met through mutual friends at a backyard barbecue and had bonded over their shared love of vintage video games and spicy food challenges. David would later tell investigators that Priscilla was the most genuine person he'd ever met, someone who never played games or created unnecessary drama. They'd talked about moving in together, maybe getting engaged within the year. She was his best friend, he said, and the future they'd planned together made sense in every way. But there was something else about Priscilla that made her special to those who truly knew her. She had an almost maternal instinct toward younger people, particularly her sister Sophia. When Sophia had struggled with anxiety during her first year of college, it was Priscilla who drove 2 hours each way, every weekend, to make sure she was eating properly and attending her classes. When neighborhood kids needed help with art projects for school, Priscilla would spend hours with them, teaching them techniques and encouraging their creativity. Her mother would often say that Priscilla had the biggest heart in the family, always putting others before herself, sometimes to her own detriment. In the weeks leading up to February 14, 2019, Priscilla had seemed especially content. She'd just completed a major project at work that had earned praise from a difficult client. She and David had celebrated their 2-year anniversary with a weekend trip to Austin. She'd been helping Sophia study for nursing school exams, creating colorful flashcards with little illustrations to make memorization easier. On the surface, everything in Priscilla Reyes's life was exactly as it should be. A young woman finding her place in the world, surrounded by people who loved her, building a future that seemed bright and full of promise. There were no obvious red flags, no signs of depression or distress, no dangerous habits or questionable associations. Priscilla was, by all accounts, living a normal, healthy life. She had dreams of eventually starting her own design studio. She wanted to travel to Mexico City to explore the art scene there. She'd been saving money to help her parents with a down payment on a newer car. These were the plans of someone invested in their future, someone with every reason to keep moving forward. And yet, on that Valentine's Day night in 2019, something went terribly, inexplicably wrong. The young woman who loved horror movies and homemade pastries, who never forgot her grandmother's bracelet and called her mother every single day, walked into a hotel elevator and vanished into a mystery that would defy every logical explanation investigators could construct. This is Priscilla's story, and it begins with a work conference in Los Angeles that was supposed to be routine, professional, and utterly unremarkable. February 14, 2019, began like any other day for Priscilla Reyes, except she wasn't waking up in her childhood bedroom in San Antonio. She was 3 states away, in room 847 of the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, attending a 3-day graphic design conference called Design Future 2019. The weather in Los Angeles that Thursday morning was overcast, with temperatures hovering around 58 degrees, a marine layer of fog blanketing the city that wouldn't burn off until nearly noon. Priscilla had arrived in Los Angeles on Tuesday, February 12th, on Southwest Airlines Flight 1247, landing at LAX at 2:15 in the afternoon. Her company had booked her a room at the Cecil Hotel, a decision made purely based on price and proximity to the Los Angeles Convention Center where the conference was being held. The Cecil Hotel, for those unfamiliar, carried a dark history that Priscilla's horror movie-loving sensibility would have appreciated under different circumstances. But on that Tuesday afternoon, checking in with her rolling suitcase and laptop bag, she was focused on the professional opportunity ahead. The conference itself was uneventful. Security footage and witness statements would later confirm Priscilla's movements over those 2.5 days. She attended morning keynote speeches, participated in afternoon breakout sessions on digital illustration techniques, and networked during evening receptions. She ate lunch on Wednesday at a food truck outside the convention center, ordering fish tacos at exactly 12:30. She FaceTimed with David on Wednesday evening at 8:15, telling him the conference was going well, but that she missed home. She sent her mother a selfie from her hotel room that same night, showing off a new design conference tote bag she'd received. Thursday, February 14th, Valentine's Day, was the final day of the conference. Priscilla woke early, posting an Instagram story at 7:03 in the morning. A photo of the Los Angeles skyline from her 8th-floor hotel window, with the caption, "Last day, can't wait to be home tomorrow." She attended the morning sessions, had lunch with 2 other conference attendees at a nearby deli, a manager from Phoenix named Kelly Brooks, and a freelancer from Seattle named Tom Chen. Both would later confirm Priscilla seemed completely normal, engaged, even excited about techniques she'd learned. The conference concluded at 4:30 that afternoon. Priscilla returned to her hotel room, and this is where the timeline becomes absolutely critical. At 5:45 p.m., she texted David, "Conference done. Going to grab dinner, then pack. Flight's at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Love you." David responded 3 minutes later with heart emojis and "Can't wait to see you." It was the last message Priscilla would ever send. At 6:20 p.m., hotel security footage shows Priscilla leaving her room, wearing jeans, a gray hoodie, and white sneakers, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She took the elevator down to the lobby and walked 3 blocks to a small Italian restaurant called Bella's Trattoria. The restaurant's security camera captured her entering at 6:33 p.m. She sat alone at a corner table, ordered spaghetti carbonara and a Coke, and spent most of the meal looking at her phone. The waitress, Maria Gonzalez, would later tell detectives that Priscilla seemed fine, maybe a little tired, but she left a good tip and smiled when she said, "Thank you." Priscilla left the restaurant at 7:41 p.m. She walked back to the Cecil Hotel, stopping briefly at a CVS pharmacy 2 blocks away. Store footage shows her purchasing a bottle of water, a pack of gum, and Advil at 7:53 p.m. The cashier wouldn't remember her. She arrived back at the hotel at 8:07 p.m., walking through the lobby and heading straight for the elevators. Nothing about her demeanor suggested distress or concern. She looked like what she was, a young professional returning to her room after dinner, ready to pack and prepare for tomorrow's flight home. And then the timeline goes dark for 3 hours and 40 minutes. No security footage captures Priscilla anywhere in the hotel between 8:07 p.m. and 11:47 p.m. Her room was on the 8th floor, and the elevator would have taken her directly there. But here's what investigators would later find strange. Her hotel room keycard was never used to enter room 847 after 8:07 p.m. The electronic lock system kept detailed logs, and according to those records, the last time that door was opened was when Priscilla left at 6:20 p.m. So if she didn't return to her room, where was she for nearly 4 hours? At 11:47 p.m., Priscilla Reyes reappeared, and this is where everything changes, where the case transforms from a simple missing person investigation into something far more disturbing and complex. The 8th-floor hallway security camera captured what would become some of the most analyzed footage in modern criminal investigation. Priscilla walks into frame from the left, still wearing the same gray hoodie, jeans, and white sneakers from earlier. But something is different now. Her movements are hesitant, almost confused. She approaches the IV elevator bank and presses the down button. Then she waits. But as she waits, her behavior becomes increasingly erratic. She steps into the elevator when the doors open, but doesn't press any buttons. She moves to one corner, then another, as if searching for something or avoiding something invisible. She steps out of the elevator, looks down the hallway in both directions, then steps back in. She presses multiple floor buttons rapidly, then presses them again. The elevator doors begin to close, but she waves her arms to trigger the sensor, making them reopen. She does this 3 times. Then Priscilla steps fully out of the elevator and moves to the side, pressing herself against the wall next to the elevator bank where she can't be easily seen. She appears to be hiding. Her hands move in strange gestures, almost as if she's talking to someone, but the footage has no audio, and the hallway appears empty. She leans out from her hiding spot, looks toward the elevator, then retreats again. This continues for approximately 2.5 minutes. Finally, at 11:50 p.m., Priscilla steps back in front of the elevator. She presses the button again. The doors open. She enters, and this time she appears to press several buttons inside. The doors close, and Priscilla Reyes vanishes. When Priscilla didn't answer her phone on Friday morning, David Martinez wasn't immediately concerned. Her flight was scheduled for 11 a.m., and he assumed she was busy packing and checking out. But when noon came and went with no text confirming she'd landed, worry began to creep in. By 1 p.m., when calls went straight to voicemail, David contacted Carmen Reyes. By 2 p.m., Carmen was calling the Cecil Hotel. The hotel front desk confirmed that Priscilla had not checked out, and that her belongings were still in room 847. By 3:30 p.m. Pacific Time, the Los Angeles Police Department received a missing person report from a frantic mother in San Antonio, begging them to find her daughter who had simply vanished from a hotel in downtown Los Angeles. LAPD officers arrived at the Cecil Hotel at 4:15 p.m. on Friday, February 15th. They were granted access to room 847, and what they found was both reassuring and deeply troubling. All of Priscilla's belongings were there, her suitcase, half-packed, her laptop, her phone charger, her toiletries in the bathroom. Her purse sat on the dresser with her wallet inside, containing her driver's license, credit cards, and $147 in cash. Her return flight ticket information was pulled up on the hotel notepad. Everything suggested someone who intended to return, who had been interrupted mid-preparation. But Priscilla herself was gone, and her phone, the one thing that was missing, had been turned off or destroyed. The last ping from her cell phone had come at 11:43 p.m. the previous night, from a tower that serviced the downtown Los Angeles area. After that, nothing. Detective Sarah Chen was assigned as the lead investigator. She was a 15-year veteran of the LAPD with extensive experience in missing persons cases, and within hours of arriving at the Cecil Hotel, she knew this was going to be complicated. The hotel's security system was extensive but had significant blind spots. There were cameras in the lobby, in hallways, near the elevators, but not inside the elevator cars themselves, and not covering every possible exit. The mighty first priority was the security footage, and this is when Detective Chen discovered the recording that would change everything. When she watched the footage from 11:47 p.m., showing Priscilla's bizarre behavior in front of the elevator, she felt the blood run cold. In her 15 years of investigating disappearances, she'd never seen anything quite like it. The young woman's behavior was so erratic, so unusual, that it raised immediate questions about her mental state, possible intoxication, or something else entirely. The footage was immediately sent to the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit and to multiple forensic video analysts. Frame by frame, specialists examined every second of that 2.5-minute recording. They analyzed her body language, her hand gestures, her facial expressions. They noted that she appeared to be looking at or speaking to someone, but the hallway was empty. They examined shadows, reflections, any evidence of another person present. They enhanced the footage, adjusted the lighting, studied her pupils for signs of drug use. The toxicology analysis from this footage, based purely on visible symptoms, suggested possible hallucinogenic influence or severe psychological break. But, without Priscilla herself, without a blood test or medical examination, it was all speculation. What the analysts could confirm was that her behavior was consistent with extreme paranoia, fear, or confusion, possibly believing she was being followed or watched. But here's what made Detective Chen's blood pressure spike. After Priscilla entered that elevator at 11:50 p.m., the electronic logs showed the elevator stopping at multiple floors: the 5th floor, 3rd floor, lobby, and basement level. Security cameras in the lobby showed the elevator doors opening at 11:52 p.m., but Priscilla didn't step out. The basement level had no security camera, a massive oversight that would later become a point of serious criticism. The lobby elevator then returned to the 8th floor at 11:54 p.m., and then nothing. No further movement. A comprehensive search of the Cecil Hotel began immediately. Every floor, every room, every storage closet, every maintenance area. The roof access was checked. It was locked from the inside. The basement was thoroughly searched. Nothing. The hotel had approximately 600 rooms across 14 floors, and management provided access to every space. Search dogs were brought in on Saturday morning, and they showed interest in several areas but couldn't provide a definitive trail. The investigation expanded beyond the hotel. Every business within a 3-block radius was contacted for security footage. Detective Chen's team reviewed hundreds of hours of recordings from nearby shops, restaurants, parking garages, and street cameras. They were looking for any glimpse of a young woman in a gray hoodie and jeans, any evidence of where Priscilla might have gone after leaving that elevator. David Martinez flew to Los Angeles on Saturday, February 16th, along with Priscilla's father, Roberto. The two men walked the streets around the Cecil Hotel, showing Priscilla's photo to anyone who would look: homeless individuals, shop owners, late-night workers, security guards. No one remembered seeing her. Carmen Reyes remained in San Antonio with Sophia, manning the phones and coordinating with media outlets in Texas, desperate to get Priscilla's face in front of as many eyes as possible. The Los Angeles news stations picked up the story by Sunday. The haunting elevator footage was released to the public on Monday, February 18th, with the Reyes family's permission. They hoped someone might recognize Priscilla, might have seen her that night, might provide the one piece of information that could bring her home. Instead, the footage went viral for all the wrong reasons. Within hours, it had millions of views. True crime communities dissected every frame. Conspiracy theories exploded across social media. Some claimed paranormal activity. Others insisted it was proof of human trafficking. The video became a sensation, but actionable leads remained frustratingly scarce. Detective Chen conducted extensive interviews with everyone Priscilla had interacted with during the conference. Every attendee who had spoken with her was questioned. Kelly Brooks and Tom Chen, her lunch companions, both passed polygraph tests. The hotel staff was interviewed, from the front desk workers to housekeeping to maintenance. Everyone's alibi for Thursday night was checked and verified. No one raised immediate suspicion. Priscilla's phone records were subpoenaed. Every call, every text, every app notification from the weeks leading up to her disappearance was analyzed. There were no threatening messages, no concerning contacts, no evidence of stalking or harassment. Her social media accounts showed a normal young woman living a normal life. Her bank account and credit card showed no unusual activity, and nothing had been used since her CVS purchase on Thursday evening. The investigation hit wall after wall. No witnesses came forward with credible sightings. No surveillance footage beyond that hallway recording showed Priscilla anywhere. It was as if she had stepped into that elevator and been erased from existence. The family's anguish was unbearable. Carmen Reyes aged years in days, her hair turning noticeably grayer, her eyes hollow with the kind of pain that only a mother missing her child can understand. Roberto stopped eating, stopped sleeping, spending 18-hour days working with private investigators the family could barely afford. David withdrew into himself, unable to reconcile the woman he loved, so stable and grounded, with the person he saw in that elevator footage. As weeks turned into months, the case of Priscilla Reyes transformed from an active investigation into something far more haunting, an unsolved mystery that would consume the lives of everyone who loved her and puzzle investigators who couldn't let it go. The elevator footage became the center of endless analysis and debate. Forensic psychologists were brought in to examine Priscilla's behavior frame by frame. Dr. Marcus Webb, a specialist in behavioral analysis with the FBI, spent 40 hours studying that 2.5-minute recording. His conclusion was both enlightening and frustrating. Priscilla's behavior was consistent with someone experiencing either severe drug-induced paranoia, a psychotic break, or genuine fear of an immediate threat. The problem was determining which. Toxicology became a critical focus. Detective Chen's team worked backward through every moment of Priscilla's time in Los Angeles, trying to identify when and where she might have been drugged. The Italian restaurant was investigated thoroughly, every employee questioned, every security tape reviewed. Nothing suspicious emerged. The conference center was examined for any evidence of contaminated food or beverages. Again, nothing. The CVS purchase was reviewed. The sealed bottle of water and packaged gum couldn't have been tampered with before purchase. This led investigators to a disturbing theory. What if Priscilla had been drugged between 8:07 p.m., when she returned to the hotel, and 11:47 p.m., when she reappeared on camera? Those missing 3 hours and 40 minutes became the focus of intense speculation. Where had she been? The TD Hotel's lack of comprehensive camera coverage meant there were blind spots, service corridors, stairwells, the basement, areas where someone could have encountered her without being recorded. Detective Chen developed a working theory that Priscilla had met someone during those missing hours, either by arrangement or by chance encounter. Perhaps she'd gone to another guest's room. Perhaps she'd been lured to the basement level. Perhaps she'd accepted a drink that was laced with something that caused the paranoid behavior captured on camera. But without witnesses, without physical evidence, It remained just a theory among many. The Internet, meanwhile, had created its own investigation. True crime forums exploded with speculation. Some claimed the footage showed evidence of supernatural activity, pointing to Priscilla's hand gestures as proof she was communicating with spirits or demons. Others insisted she was playing a strange game, a viral challenge gone wrong. More sinister. Theories suggested human trafficking, that someone had stalked her during the conference and followed her back to the hotel. Some amateur detectives claimed to see a shadow in the hallway footage, evidence of another person just out of frame, though professional analysts found no such evidence. The hotel itself, the Cecil Hotel, became part of the narrative. Its dark history, including previous deaths and disappearances, was dragged into the conversation. Some suggested the building itself was cursed, that Priscilla was just the latest victim of whatever malevolent force resided there. Detective Chen found these theories frustrating but understandable. People needed explanations, even supernatural ones, when reality provided none. For the Reyes family, every viral video, every conspiracy theory, every online discussion was a fresh wound. Carmen Reyes would lie awake at night, her laptop open, reading through forums where strangers dissected her daughter's final moments. She would see people treating Priscilla's disappearance like a puzzle to be solved, an entertainment, when it was her baby who was missing. The family hired a private investigator, Robert Shaw, a former LAPD detective who specialized in cold cases. Shaw worked the case for 14 months, conducting his own interviews, reviewing evidence, exploring theories that official channels had dismissed. He spent the Reyes family's savings and reached the same frustrating conclusion. Without new evidence, without a witness, without Priscilla herself, there was nowhere left to look. David Martinez couldn't move forward. He couldn't date. Couldn't imagine a future that didn't include answers about what happened to the woman he'd planned to marry. He kept Priscilla's photos on his phone, her voicemails saved, her toothbrush still in his bathroom 2 years later. Friends worried about him. His family begged him to seek therapy. He went through the motions, but remained trapped in February 2019, unable to accept that Priscilla was gone without understanding why. Sophia Reyes struggled to complete nursing school. The younger sister, who had relied so much on Priscilla's support, found herself paralyzed by grief and guilt. She would tell her therapist that she felt selfish for living her life when Priscilla's had been cut short or lost or whatever had happened. She couldn't even define what had happened because there was no definition, no closure, no grave to visit, no confirmed tragedy to mourn. The official investigation never truly closed, but it went cold. Detective Chen moved on to other cases, though she kept Priscilla's file on her desk, pulling it out periodically to review, hoping fresh eyes might catch something she'd missed. The FBI's involvement faded after the first year. The LAPD's Missing Persons Unit kept the case active, but had no new leads to pursue. Priscilla Reyes became another name on a list of unsolved disappearances, another face on a website of missing people, another family waiting for answers that might never come. As the second anniversary of her disappearance approached in February 2021, the Reyes family held a vigil in San Antonio. 200 people attended, friends, family, community members who had been moved by Priscilla's story. They lit candles and shared memories and prayed for answers. Carmen Reyes spoke, her voice breaking as she begged anyone with information to come forward. The local news covered it, but by the next day, it had faded from public consciousness. The world had moved on. The Reyes family could not. March 17, 2022, 3 years and 1 month after Priscilla Reyes vanished, brought the break that investigators had desperately needed, and it came from the most unexpected source, a renovation project. The Cecil Hotel had been sold to new ownership in late 2021, and the new owners had plans for extensive renovations to rehabilitate the building's reputation and update its aging infrastructure. Part of this renovation involved a complete overhaul of the basement level, which had served as storage and housed mechanical systems for decades. On that Thursday morning in March, a construction crew led by foreman Miguel Torres began removing old water tanks from a sealed section of the basement that hadn't been accessed in years. At 9:43 a.m., Miguel's crew breached a wall in the basement's northwest corner, revealing a space behind it that wasn't on any current building plans. It was a narrow maintenance corridor, approximately 4 feet wide and 20 feet long, that had been sealed off at some point in the hotel's history. The air that escaped when they broke through was stale and carried a smell that made Miguel immediately order his crew to stop work and step back. LAPD was called at 9:51 a.m. By 10:30, Detective Sarah Chen was on scene, and by 11:15, the coroner's office had been notified. Because there, in that sealed corridor, wedged behind an old boiler system in a space barely large enough for a person to fit, were human remains. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition, but certain details were immediately apparent. Female, approximately 5 feet 4 inches tall based on bone measurements, slender build. She was wearing deteriorated denim jeans, remnants of a gray hoodie, and white sneakers that had somehow maintained their shape. On the left wrist, tarnished but intact, was a silver bracelet. And on the right ankle bone, still visible despite tissue degradation, was a small tattoo of a hummingbird. The coroner's preliminary identification was confirmed within hours through dental records. The remains were those of Priscilla Elena Reyes, age 23, missing since February 14, 2019. She had been in that basement corridor the entire time, less than 100 feet from the lobby, where her parents had pleaded for information, where search teams had staged their operations, where Detective Chen had coordinated the investigation. The forensic examination that followed was exhaustive and, in many ways, more disturbing than the discovery itself. The autopsy, conducted by Dr. Patricia Morrison of the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, revealed findings that raised as many questions as they answered. Cause of death was determined to be hypothermia and dehydration, consistent with someone who had been trapped without access to water or adequate warmth. The ambient temperature in that sealed corridor, measured after the discovery, averaged between 48 and 52 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to be deadly over an extended period, but not immediately fatal. Dr. Morrison estimated that Priscilla had survived for anywhere between 48 and 72 hours after becoming trapped. The implications were devastating. Priscilla hadn't died immediately. She had been alive in that corridor for days, in the dark, in the cold, while her family filed reports and search teams combed the hotel floors above her. The autopsy found evidence of scraping on her fingertips, consistent with attempting to claw at walls or surfaces. Defensive injuries were absent, suggesting she hadn't been attacked or assaulted. There were no signs of sexual violence, no evidence of beating or stabbing or shooting. But here's where the forensic evidence became truly puzzling. Toxicology results from bone marrow and remaining tissue samples detected elevated levels of scopolamine, a drug that in high doses can cause hallucinations, confusion, and memory loss. Scopolamine, sometimes called devil's breath, has a dark reputation as a date rape drug because it can make victims extremely suggestible and unable to form clear memories. The presence of this drug in Priscilla's system explained the erratic behavior captured on the elevator footage, The paranoia, the confusion, the sense that she was fleeing from something. Detective Chen's theory crystallized with this evidence. Someone had drugged Priscilla during those missing hours between 8:07 and 11:47 p.m. Under the influence of scopolamine, disoriented and frightened, Priscilla had wandered the hotel. She had somehow accessed the basement level, a theory supported by the elevator logs showing the car stopping at the basement. In her confused state, she had found her way into that maintenance corridor, perhaps trying to hide from her imagined pursuers, perhaps simply wandering until she became trapped. The question of how the corridor came to be sealed was investigated thoroughly. Building records showed that a routine maintenance check had been scheduled for the basement on February 15, 2019, the day after Priscilla disappeared. A work order indicated that a wall panel had been temporarily removed for pipe inspection and then replaced. The maintenance worker, a man named Carl Henderson, who had since retired, was located and interviewed. He confirmed he'd done the work that Friday morning, but insisted he'd checked the corridor beforehand and found it empty. He'd replaced the panel, secured it, and moved on to other tasks. Was Carl Henderson lying? Had he somehow missed seeing Priscilla in that corridor? Or had she been elsewhere and somehow entered the space after he'd sealed it? The investigation into Henderson was thorough, but he had no connection to Priscilla, no motive, and had passed a polygraph test. Detective Chen's conclusion was that Henderson had done cursory check, maybe shining a flashlight into the space, but not physically entering it. And in the darkness and tight confines, he'd missed seeing Priscilla, who might have been unconscious or hiding behind the boiler system. The question that haunted everyone was, who drugged her? Who had Priscilla encountered during those missing hours? Despite the discovery of her body and the IDAM toxicology results, this question remained unanswered. Hotel guest records from that night were reviewed again, but with 3 years of distance, many guests were untraceable. Security footage from other cameras was reviewed with new urgency. But if Priscilla's attacker existed, they had managed to avoid every camera in the building. The Reyes family finally had answers, but they were the kind of answers that destroyed you. Carmen Reyes collapsed when she received the call from Detective Chen. Roberto had to be sedated. Sophia stopped speaking for 3 days. David Martinez broke down completely, because knowing Priscilla had died slowly, trapped and alone and frightened, was somehow worse than any quick violence could have been. She had been alive, calling for help that never came, in a darkness no one would penetrate for 3 years. The case of Priscilla Reyes officially remains open, classified as a suspicious death with an unknown perpetrator. Detective Sarah Chen, who has since been promoted to lieutenant, continues to review the case file periodically, hoping that advances in forensic technology or a deathbed confession or some miracle will finally identify who drugged Priscilla that night. But, as of today, in October 2025, no arrests have been made. No suspect has been publicly identified. The person responsible for administering the scopolamine that sent Priscilla into that fatal confusion has never been found. The most plausible theory, based on all available evidence, is this. Priscilla encountered someone in the Cecil Hotel between 8:07 p.m. and 11:47 p.m. on February 14, 2019. This person, whether a hotel guest, employee, or outsider who had gained access to the building, drugged her drink or food with scopolamine. The motive remains unclear. Was it intended as a prelude to sexual assault that was interrupted? Was it a robbery attempt that went wrong? Or was it something more sinister, a predator who derived satisfaction from creating chaos and confusion? Under the influence of the drug, Priscilla's perception of reality became severely distorted. The behavior captured on the elevator footage, the hiding, the paranoid gestures, the confused button pressing, was her brain trying to process a world that no longer made sense. In this altered state, she made her way to the basement level, possibly believing she was escaping a threat, possibly following the disjointed logic that drugs like scopolamine can create. She entered the maintenance corridor, perhaps crawling behind the boiler system to hide, and became trapped when the maintenance worker sealed the wall panel the next morning without conducting a thorough inspection. But this theory, while supported by evidence, leaves critical questions unanswered. Who drugged her, and how did they avoid every security camera? Why did no witnesses come forward reporting unusual behavior or suspicious individuals? If the intent was assault or robbery, why wasn't Priscilla's body found in a more obvious location? And perhaps most haunting, did the perpetrator know what they had done? Or did they believe Priscilla had simply escaped and disappeared into Los Angeles? Some elements of the case will likely never be explained. The specific mechanism by which scopolamine was administered remains unknown. The identity of anyone Priscilla may have interacted with during those missing hours has never been established. The tricky question of whether her death was the intended outcome or a tragic accident resulting from drugging her for another purpose cannot be definitively answered. Even the precise timeline of when she entered that corridor and when she died can only be estimated. The forensic evidence tells us what happened to Priscilla's body, but it cannot fully explain the human tragedy of her final hours. We know she was cold, disoriented, and ultimately alone as hypothermia and dehydration slowly shut down her systems. We know she tried to escape, evidenced by the scraping on her fingers. But we cannot know what she was thinking, whether the drug's effects persisted until her death, or if there were moments of clarity where she understood her situation. We cannot know if she called for help or if the drug rendered her unable to make sounds loud enough to be heard through the walls. The investigation into hotel staff and guests from that night has been extensive, but ultimately inconclusive. Of the 437 guests checked into the Cecil Hotel on February 14, 2019, approximately 63 were solo male travelers who could theoretically fit a perpetrator profile. Each was investigated to the extent possible. Background checks were conducted. Travel patterns were analyzed. Social media histories were reviewed. Several had minor criminal records, mostly drug possession or DUI charges, but nothing that definitively linked any individual to Priscilla's drugging. 3 years of distance made alibis impossible to verify and memories unreliable. The hotel employees numbered 47 that worked shifts overlapping with Priscilla's disappearance. Again, thorough investigation yielded no strong suspect. Carl Henderson, the maintenance worker who sealed the corridor, remained the closest thing to a person of interest, but evidence suggesting his actual involvement was circumstantial at best. He had access, he had opportunity, but he had no apparent motive and no history of violence or sexual offenses. The tragic reality is that Priscilla's case demonstrates the limitations of even extensive investigation when crucial evidence is absent. Without witnesses to the drugging, without video of the perpetrator, without DNA evidence that can be matched to a suspect, the case cannot progress beyond theory and speculation. The scopolamine in Priscilla's system proves she was drugged, but it cannot tell us by whom. For the Reyes family, the ORED, discovery of Priscilla's body brought a kind of closure, though not the kind anyone would wish for. They were finally able to hold a funeral, to bury their daughter and sister in San Antonio's San Fernando Cemetery, next to her grandmother, who had given her that silver bracelet. Carmen Reyes can visit a grave now, can leave flowers and talk to her daughter, though the conversations are one-sided and filled with questions that will never be answered. David Martinez attended the funeral, but has struggled to attend the gravesite since. He has slowly begun to rebuild his life, entering therapy, eventually attempting to date again, though relationships remain difficult. He says he sees Priscilla in that elevator footage whenever he closes his eyes, and he cannot escape the knowledge that while he was texting her heart emojis and saying he couldn't wait to see her, she was hours away from a nightmare that would end her life. Sophia completed nursing school, dedicating her degree to Priscilla's memory. She now works in a San Antonio emergency room, and she says that every patient she helps, every life she touches in her work, is done in honor of the sister who supported her through her darkest moments. The hummingbird tattoo, the symbol Priscilla chose to represent freedom and resilience, is now tattooed on Sophia's right ankle as well, a permanent reminder of the person she lost and the strength she found to continue. The case has had broader implications beyond the Reyes family. The Cecil Hotel, already notorious for its dark history, became even more infamous after Priscilla's discovery. The renovation project that uncovered her remains was eventually completed, and the building was converted into affordable housing in 2023, an attempt to rehabilitate its reputation and put the building to better use. Security protocols in hotels across Los Angeles were reviewed and updated, with particular attention paid to basement access and maintenance procedures. The elevator footage continues to circulate online, though many true crime communities have made efforts to treat it with more respect after learning the full story. Priscilla's case is studied in forensic psychology courses as an example of drug-induced behavior and the challenges of interpreting surveillance footage without full context. Detective training programs use the case to emphasize the importance of thorough searches and the dangers of leaving any area unexamined during missing person investigations. But beyond the procedural lessons and the institutional changes, Priscilla Reyes's story remains what it always was: a devastating reminder of how quickly a normal life can be destroyed by a chance encounter with evil. She was a young woman with dreams and plans, someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's love. She went to Los Angeles for a work conference, did everything right, stayed in contact with family, followed reasonable safety precautions, and still became a victim. The question of who drugged Priscilla that night continues to haunt everyone involved in the investigation. That person, if they're still alive, is walking free. They may not even know that their actions led to her death, or they may carry the knowledge as a terrible secret. Detective Chen believes that someone out there knows something, saw something, heard something that could break this case open. She continues to hope that conscience or circumstance will eventually bring that information to light. Until then, Priscilla Elena Reyes's case remains a mystery wrapped in tragedy. A young life ended far too soon in circumstances that defy complete understanding. The image of her standing in that hotel corridor, confused and frightened, has become iconic in true crime communities. But it's important to remember that behind that footage was a real person. Someone who loved horror movies and baked pan dulce and called her mother every day. Someone who deserved to come home from that conference, to continue building her life, to fulfill the promise that everyone who knew her could see. Her story is a reminder to stay vigilant, to look out for each other, and to never take for granted that the people we love will return safely from what should be routine trips. It's a reminder that monsters don't always look like monsters, and that danger can hide behind hotel room doors and in basement corridors we never knew existed. If you have any information about Priscilla Reyes's case, about anyone who may have been acting suspiciously at the Cecil Hotel on February 14, 2019, or about similar incidents involving scopolamine drugging, the LAPD asks that you contact their tip line. Even the smallest detail, something that seemed insignificant at the time, could be the piece that finally brings justice for Priscilla and peace for her family. Rest in peace, Priscilla Elena Reyes. February 1st, 1996 to February 2, 2019. Gone, but never, ever forgotten.